Well, again, welcome and good morning. My name is Travis Meredith, I'm the county manager. I'm at least partially to blame for you being here this morning. I'll go ahead and just turn it right over to Kate Penhagen and Ann Marshall.
Travis is a little bit under the weather, as you may be able to tell, so I apologize. And he apologizes for not being able to give longer remarks, but I'm going to give you the logistics. My name is Kate Penhagen. I am the Criminal Justice Resource Director. I am also the Interim Deputy Manager. I am so glad to see you all on a cold Saturday morning, which I think is going to warm up a bit. Just to let you know, please have some coffee and some snacks back there. The bathrooms are just out the door here to your left, so feel free to come and go from the snack table, from the bathrooms. I wanted to make sure, because we always need to acknowledge our electeds who are here, and I want to acknowledge our county commissioners who are here today. We have Jean Hamilton in the back. We have Marilyn Carter in the back. And we have Sally Green right here. And then we have a Chapel Hill elected, Karen Stegman, who is here. I don't think, have I missed anybody else from our elected community? No.
BM's on his way.
Yes, sir.
I was going to say, I'm representing the office of Congresswoman Valerie Fouché.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome. Thank you for being here on behalf of Congressman Fouché. And you said, I'm sorry, Karen, who's?
BM Mallard is on his way.
He's on his way. Okay, well, we will acknowledge him later. So thank you. We have a very short time for a very large topic, low barrier housing and the needs in Orange County. So many critical conversations are needed and are happening about housing, whether it's emergency shelter, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's eviction diversion, home preservation, but this forum is specifically about low barrier housing, and that's housing that is that provides immediate and easy access with a focus on harm reduction and support. It's designed to serve people with significant obstacles to accessing housing because they may be reentering from incarceration, they may be reentering from an institution, they may be experiencing homelessness, and they may have significant behavioral health concerns. If you are here today, it's because you recognize this critical need. But we all know it's not the only housing need, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page that this is just one of many, many critical housing issues. In November, many of you may have attended the Justice United Countywide Assembly, which highlighted the priority need of reentry housing and actually recommended that the county convene a work group. Our county manager, Travis Meredith, immediately set about doing that with the strong support of the commissioners. And this work group was created to sort of prioritize immediate and longer-term low-barrier housing needs. This work group begins its meetings in February 12th to be exact. And I'm going to introduce the folks from that work group who may be here today. It's also on some information in the back. If you pick it up, there's also an agenda up there. Make sure you see that there's an agenda up there with the program, as well as the memo that was presented to the commissioners about the work group and its mission and its members. But just to introduce those who are here today, Blake Rosser is our housing director. Danielle Butler, who is our partnership to end homelessness programs manager. I'm not sure where she is. There she is, barely waving. Ben Gear, who is our local reentry council coordinator. Cy Stover, who is our planning and inspections director for the county. He's not here this morning. Paul Slack, who is our Orange County Office of Equity and Inclusion chief. He's not here this morning. Myself, Tommy Green, who we hope is going to be here soon. He is the Orange County Community Health Worker and Supervisor for the FIT program. Ann Oshel, who is here, who I will introduce in a minute, from Alliance Health. Sarah Vinas, who is the Town of Chapel Hill's Housing and Community Connections Director, who's not here. Anne-Marie Vanneman, who is Carborough's Housing and Community Services Director, and Matt Eford, Hillsborough's Assistant Town Manager and Community Services Director, who is here with us. So this group will begin meeting in February, as I mentioned, and they'll be hearing from the community partners, seeking innovative ideas, looking at potential funding collaborations, and identifying opportunities and recommendations to bring to the manager and to the commissioners. So for today's kickoff event of the work group, what we are trying to achieve here is to hear from an amazing group of panelists who are all working to address low barrier housing needs here and in other neighboring counties, and to get your input. This is going to also be on Facebook Live. It'll be recorded, so for those who are not able to be here today, it will be available for people to listen to, and there's also a survey online that folks can fill out if they're not here, and if you'd rather fill out the hard copy, it's in the back there, so please do that. But after we have this panel discussion and an opportunity for some questions, we will then pivot to these 4 tables in the back, which each have a topic which is on your program, and I would like for everyone to circulate for about 10 to 15 minutes to each table so that you have an opportunity to be part of the discussion on that topic and to give some input that we will be tracking beyond the surveys. So finally, I just want to say that there are so many incredible people working in Orange County to address low barrier housing needs, and so many more who want to be part of the solution. And yet the needs are so great in this county of abundance. This work needs to be inclusive of all voices, especially those who face overwhelming and inequitable barriers every single day. This effort will need everyone at the table in a true partnership and collaboration. And speaking of collaboration, it is my pleasure to now turn it over to Ann Oshel, who is the Senior Vice President for Community Health and Wellbeing at Alliance Health, a co-sponsor of this event, and a committed partner. So last time Ann and I spoke was at the ribbon cutting of the Wonderful House. It was a collaboration between Alliance and Orange County for a bridge housing program. And if you haven't been, it's on Homestead Road. You can come and visit, schedule a visit there. There are some lives being transformed there day in and day out. It's really a wonderful place, but it only serves 6 individuals, and it's full. So, but if you know Ann, you know her passion for this work and her ability to get things done. It is a privilege to have her partnership on this, and I invite her to come up and say a few words. Thanks.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here. And I will tell you that Alliance Health would not have been able to do what we have done in Orange County so far if it wasn't for the support of the county and our county commissioners. When we have been serving the residents of Orange County who have behavioral health needs that are that have Medicaid or are uninsured for 3 years now. And when we began engaging with our community partners and our county partners, we came in saying housing is healthcare. And what can we do in housing? What are you all doing in housing? Where can we help? What can we pay for? How can Medicaid be a payer of supportive services? How can we align all of the great work and create some momentum and some synergy to serve more people, but also serve them with supportive services? Housing should not be the end goal of a community. Community living should be the end goal for people. And so we are delighted that we have gotten as far as actually having this type of event. I will put another plug into the Wonderful House, which is the first bridge housing program with a therapeutic focus serving those that have the highest needs in Orange County. It was a labor of love. And I just want to kind of give a shout out to my partner in all of this, Kate. You know, we started thinking about it, dreaming about it from day one. These types of programs are opportunistic. You can't have them unless you have a location. And so some of that is what we actually want to talk about today. the bridge housing is just the beginning of what we would like to do in partnership, and to find the right location for the right purpose, for the right people, is usually the biggest challenge in making some of this a reality. So we look forward to hearing some solutions. I also want to thank the panel, especially a couple of them who changed their plans on a Saturday to join us. Really appreciate that, Russ and David, for doing that. We partner with their programs in Durham, which you'll hear a little bit more about. But we are happy to be here, happy to start these conversations, and look forward to reporting back our continued progress and just making sure that those that need a safe and supported place to live, both temporarily and permanently, that we just all come together and figure out what it's going to take. Thank you.
Blake, our housing director, is going to moderate this panel and introduce this panel of folks that we have to talk to today.
Thank you. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge the somewhat awkward placement of the lectern here, where it's not quite as mobile as we would like, so I prefer to be more to the side on an equal footing with the panel and not hovering behind them, but we work with what we got. I'm going to introduce the panelists real quick, and then we'll get started with questions. First we have, and I'm going in alphabetical order, we have Lindsay Blank, who is the Cornerstone Bridge Housing Program Manager at Wake County and LCSW. We have David Crispell, who is Executive Director of Durham's Jubilee Home for the last 13 years, and since 2015 the head pastor of Mount Auburn United Church of Christ. We have Tiffany Hall, the Street Outreach Clinical Coordinator with Orange County. She's also a licensed clinical mental health counselor, a licensed clinical addiction specialist, and a national certified counselor. We have Russell Pierce, Executive Director of Housing for New Hope, provider of supportive housing in the Triangle area. And we have Kristen Powers, Executive Director of Benevolence Farm, which provides transitional housing and employment to women leaving incarceration. We have one panelist who was unable to make it, unfortunately, who was delayed out of town. That was Tommy Green, who is community health worker and formerly incarcerated transition FIT program manager. Just to get started, I would like to give each of our panelists a chance to describe their program or their work. So giving a short description of what they're doing in this area, and to please include specific barriers for the population that you serve. So if we want to start at the end with Kristen.
This is a learning thing for us.
But that's what I realized.
Hello everyone,
That's a
my
good
name is
thing to do
Kristen
as part of
Powers,
the
either A pronouns. I'm the Executive Director of Benevolence Farm. Also a proud Chapel Hill High School graduate, living in Alamance County now. So I've been in this building quite a few times in the past. But I have the honor of leading Benevolence Farm, which is a nonprofit serving formerly incarcerated women and gender expansive people across majority rural North Carolina. We are headquartered in Alamance County, which I know is a bit unusual. Usually headquarters are in like Raleigh or Durham or Charlotte, but we work out of Alamance County, where our main housing program has been for the last 8 or so years. We serve people of all conviction types, so every felony class, every length of incarceration, also welcoming trans people from all over the state of North Carolina with a focus on state prisons and jails. And we have learned a lot in the last 8 years that we'll share more of, but we also, while physically located in Alamance, serve people across the Carolina through our Housing First Fund, which provides security deposit payments to people in rural communities to help lower the barriers to entry. And I think the high level question of some of the barriers we see is it's pretty obvious to everyone probably here is the number of available places for people to go, but also the availability for people of all conviction types, including people in recovery, people with mental health diagnoses or disabilities, and people on the sex offender registry. And so we've tried to open it up to make sure that people of all those experiences can come home to a safe place. So I'll touch more on that later. Thank you for having me.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Excuse me. I'm Lindsay Blank. I'm the Cornerstone Program Manager with Wayne County Government. And Cornerstone encompasses like several different programs. But today I'm going to be talking about our Bridge Housing Program, which is 20 residential units, and we prioritize those that are chronically homeless with disabling conditions. And we are specifically working with people that are high needs, whether it's chronic medical conditions, mental health, substance use, legal issues, crisis utilization, things like that. Obviously, the people that we serve come with lots of barriers when it comes to housing, whether it be untreated mental health or substance use, criminal histories, addiction histories, no credit history or bad credit scores. We are a housing first program, and so we work with people providing intensive supports to help them transition into permanent housing. Thank you.
My name is Tiffany Hall, and I am the coordinator of the Street Outreach, Harmreduction, and Reflection Program. We're termed SORED. So what we do is we work with those individuals who are unsheltered in Orange County. And unsheltered meaning staying in places that are unfit for habitation, like in their car, on the street, abandoned buildings. And what we do is there are four of us, myself and 3 peer navigators, and we go directly into the community and we work with those who are unsheltered, helping them giving them linkage to mental health, substance use services, also helping them find housing. That's our ultimate goal, low barrier housing, and also harm reduction. It's a partnership between the housing department and the criminal justice resource department. So one of our efforts is to also reduce minor, I don't want to say trespass issues, or minor crimes, so that people are deflected away from going into the criminal justice system. So we come out and we deflect them from law enforcement. We'll come out and meet with them and provide supplies as well. Our referrals can be self-referrals. They can be from businesses. They can be from people who are just passersby wanting welfare checks on those who are that they see that they may think are unsheltered. One of our main barriers is definitely availability of low barrier housing and affordability or affordable housing. And I would say also the stigma that people attach with someone who is unsheltered in private housing. So 3 main barriers.
Oh, it's already on? Okay. I was looking for the little red light. Did I turn it off? Okay. I'm Russ Pierce. I serve as Executive Director of Housing for New Homes. We are a 30-plus-year-old agency working in homeless services. We actually began as a transitional shelter in response to seeing a lot of folks come into the emergency shelter, go to housing, and come back pretty rapidly. And innovation in the early 90s was transitional shelter. Over time, we began street outreach, which we have been doing for more than 20 years, and we take the lead on that for a map of the city and the county and Durham. We also were one of the first 3 agencies to launch rapid rehousing in North Carolina and continue to be the lead provider of rapid rehousing. So for folks, that's an outcome of Housing First, or works on Housing First principles, the goal being if we can skip the shelter and go straight to housing, get folks housed and surround them with services, that's the key. And for rapid rehousing, that's only about 2 years. So folks who have barriers, but not maybe the intensive barriers that we would normally see for permanent supported housing. So we also, for more than 20 years, have operated both campus-based support housing programs where we own and operate a campus, and services and things are brought to the campus to connect with clients. And then also the largest permanent supportive housing program that actually works with landlords in the community. In addition to that, on behalf of the city and our other partners, we are the main agency doing landlord engagement, finding new opportunities for housing in Durham, which you can imagine has been an interesting challenge the last 3 or 4 years with changing housing costs. It's very significant. So for us, in terms of barriers, I mean, we are often working with folks who have been very long-term in their homelessness. In particular with permanent supportive housing, For us, about 60% of folks, whether they're coming to the campus-based opportunities or community-based opportunities, 60 to 65% of the time, we're going to be working with someone who has a severe and persistent mental health issue and a substance use disorder, as I say, kind of wrapped around it for understandable reasons. But that is what we are most commonly wanting to see. I will say that over the last few years, we've seen an intensification where we have hit count on what your hit count is. We've got hit count coming up on Monday night.
Us too.
What's that?
Us too.
Oh, right, yeah. Waiting there is on Wednesday, so at least I think we're going to have 4 degrees better temperatures on Monday night. But you know what we saw last year from that was significant increases again with people with severe and persistent mental health challenges, substance use issues. Those are both very real. And part of what we're starting to see consistently is there's a population that their health is such while they're unsheltered that you have to start trying to address their health issues while they're unsheltered to get them to the point of having a conversation around housing. And that's a little bit of a shift in the population that we're seeing. It's always been there, but the percentage of folks that are in that place is growing. So we're working on a new pilot project with ARPA funds from the county to add nurses to the teams to go out and some psychiatric help on an experimental basis to see how that works. So for us, oftentimes people, those are the main pieces we're working with in terms of getting them ready to be in housing.
Thanks, Russ. I'm Dave Crispell. I'm the Executive Director of Jubilee Home, and I have a little bit of an inferiority complex because if I need something, I call Russ, or I call Kristen, so you're in good hands here. At Jubilee Home, we provide transitional and supportive housing for folks coming out of incarceration in Durham. We have a transitional home that houses up to 6 men at a time, where you're getting really high-touch support for 12 to 18 months. With peer navigators who are doing most of your linkage to care and your casework, and also they're being assisted by some social workers who are helping them make sure they can navigate the systems well and figuring out which partnerships we need to be utilizing in the community to meet the needs of the person that has come to us. We start with an assessment where you kind of tell us your goals, and then we're going to work on those goals as opposed to tell you what you need. We may assist you with some goals if some are lacking. No one's ever come to you with have been like, I would love to leave here with a well-planned budget. But that's something you're going to get. We view wellness in a holistic manner, and we're going to really try to focus on the 8 dimensions of wellness and build you up in all those ways that we can while you're with us. One of the barriers we see, we also have some permanent housing. We have a duplex that when we first purchased it, we imagined it would kind of be next step housing, similar to what Russ was saying. We've seen individuals who did not go to the park for 12 months enter in kind of the free market, if you will, and then really struggle in that space, kind of away from our community and away from our support. And so we purchased a duplex across the street. It's 2 2-bedroom apartments. We thought that would be another place someone could stay for another 6, 12, 18 months as they just continue to build themselves out. What happened was no one ever moved out of that. The first turnover we had was like 3 years because it's high quality, affordable housing, and you get to be part of a supportive community. And so we've scrapped that idea of what it was going to be. It's just permanent affordable housing, particularly for folks with convictions that make it really difficult to find rental units in Durham. We are low barrier in our transitional housing, so what that means is almost everybody, and when I say almost everybody, from 2024, 88% of our folks check the boxes of co-occurring behavioral health disorder, substance use disorder, along with being below the federal poverty line and with a serious criminal conviction. And so I think our people are great. I think that does not diminish who's coming through our doors. They're incredible, and they're the strongest, most resilient folks that I've ever met in my life, but it's really hard to move from Jubilee Home into sort of the regular world because, like everyone else at this table knows, the private market for housing is just not super motivated to meet barriers where they're at. The market is such that landlords don't need to deal with that right now, and so they're choosing not to. But because in their minds that they're landlords. That's what they do. They provide housing for folks who need it, and they do that part well. But the biggest fear our people find, and we find, is when someone finishes a transitional program at Jubilee Home, where do they go next? And too often it's actually a step back, not a step forward, but because of the housing we're able to find. So we're excited to look forward and try to expand our permanent housing because we don't care about your conviction. We care about who you are, and we know you. Anyway, we would love for you to be part of our community, and if that's something we can offer, that's what we want to do.
Thank you very much, all. For the next couple questions, I'm going to take sort of a bird's eye overview picture of the topic, which I think will be helpful for folks who haven't necessarily engaged a lot on this topic. So I'm going to ask Lindsay to please just explain to the audience, what is bridge housing? What do we mean when we use that term?
Yeah. So we look at bridge housing as the bridge from homelessness to permanent housing. At Cornerstone, we have 20 units, and so we prioritize those that are literally on the street. We want to take people with the highest needs, and we look at different dimensions, including mental health, medical care. When you're homeless, you're not able to treat medical conditions. Oftentimes those things get pushed aside. Substance use, legal issues, whether it's being arrested for crimes related to being homeless, or other barriers that come up for finding housing. Also crisis utilization. Are you calling 911 a lot frequently? Are you going to like crisis, mental health crisis centers, things like that? And then also just like, are you chronically homeless, which is homeless for 1 year or more, or 3 more episodes, totally a year. So that's how our bridge housing program works. I think when you read about bridge housing in general, sometimes they just talk about the bridge, the transition time between getting onto a voucher. And what we do for our clients is we don't guarantee a voucher. We want to connect somebody with the most appropriate housing opportunity for them. Most of the time, that means a housing voucher. We do have money set aside to help with people in vouchers and permanent housing. But if we determine that somebody won't be successful in that type of environment, then we want to make sure that somebody's going to go to the best fit for them.
Thank you. And similarly, with the general overview, I'm going to ask Russ to explain what permanent supportive housing is, and just briefly how it differs from bridge housing, and even maybe how it differs from rapid rehousing.
Absolutely. So permanent supportive housing, again, grows out of this idea of this approach of housing first. Let's get folks into housing, surround them with supportive services, and they'll be more successful. And I will share, a few years ago, when we were actually looking at street outreach, we were looking at folks who went straight from our street outreach into housing versus going through the shelter. And let me, especially since this is being recorded, let me make this statement. I believe in emergency shelters, and I believe emergency should always be in front of the word shelter. If that's what it is, the way I believe in emergency rooms. Nobody wants to be in the emergency room any longer than they have to get sent home with their meds or whatever they need, or to the right supportive program, right? So emergency shelter the same way. But when we were able to get folks straight from street outreach into being unsheltered into housing, the rate at which they were taking up opportunities around primary care, mental health care, substance use, supportive services was in the 60 to 70% range. If they went through the shelter, it was in the teens. And so being able to just get people connected that way is really critical. So rapid rehousing is for folks, I often will say, and this is not scientific, but if on a scale of 1 to 20 for needs, for me, rapid rehousing was designed for people in that 7, 8, 9, 10 range in terms of the level of need that they have. It's a bump in the road, a couple things have happened, but within 2 years, with financial support towards rent things, and community connections, and a case manager alongside them helping them work toward their goals, that they should be able to be fairly stable after that. And I will say, I know for rapid rehousing for us, folks are in like the 90% range for being able to stay stably housed afterward. Permanent supportive housing is, as was mentioned, is for people who are experiencing chronic homelessness. So that's going to mean having at least a year of homelessness, and that can either be a straight year, or I never quite get this right, so I'm going to look for Danielle Smothers, or 3
4 episodes in 3 years accumulated to a year. Did I get it? Okay. Yeah. I'm going to send that into the government when they start looking at ways to make our lives easier. Maybe not something that technical. And also have a disabling condition. Again, we're going to see a lot of issues around severe mental health and substance use. And the permanent, sometimes people hear permanent, think that means like forever and ever. For some folks, that housing option they go into is going to be their longest option, but permanent is kind of a technical, like they should have a year lease. That's really what the permanent means. It says permanent means a year lease. And so they will have their own lease, whether it's at a property like we own and operate, or with a partner landlord in the community, or another organization. And then they'll have access to case management. They'll have access to connections to community and other support services for the long haul. And what we'll often see is, I would say, I think of our campuses in particular, about a third of the population coming in will be successful and be able to be bridged eventually to a housing choice voucher or another kind of supported housing. About a third, that may be the place that is there long term. I know that when we started experiencing rapid gentrification in Durham, we had a lot of folks who were living on the east side of town and have been very stably housed for a long time in our community-based supportive housing programs, and they just lost their housing because the houses were sold, people wanted to live in them. So that can be long term. And then about a third, people are dealing with a lot of challenges. This may not be the successful journey through. They may re-enter homelessness, and then come back another time and are successful. So it really does, and that a third is not exactly scientific, but that's kind of my impression of what we experience of folks going through.
Thank you. For the next question, I'd like to get the opinion of both Dave and Tiffany about the role of harm reduction in low barrier housing. If you all could share your thoughts on that.
Well, I'll talk about harm reduction at Juliano, and then I'll let you speak maybe more broad. Why don't you start with sort of the more broad harm reduction, what it is, what's going on, and then I'll talk about it in context of Juliano.
Harm reduction, I think, can be deflection or can be deflecting someone from criminal charges that don't need to be into the system. Harm reduction can also be giving out supplies that help with, say, Narcan, safe syringe. It can be things like that. So I think harm reduction is just basically helping those individuals so that they can steer away from anything that is unnecessary, like charges or any other kind of stigma.
And so harm reduction in the context of low barrier housing, how we approach it in Durham, and how got to give out shout out to the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition, because they've been really great partners in walking alongside us with this, because we didn't start out as sort of being pro harm reduction as an organization, and we've really been brought along on that pathway by them. So for Juvenile, we work really hard to lower our barriers to people who need the services we provide. So what that has meant is us learning how to be a housing provider that recognizes that people who use drugs need housing. And I'll kind of lean in particular with that for harm reduction. I think harm reduction is all the things, right? Housing is harm reduction. Your seatbelt is harm reduction. Lots of things that we do every day is harm reduction, but specifically for those people using drugs who need housing, what that's meant for Juvenile is we've had to become more open and learn more about how to provide appropriate services and maintain a safe environment. And so that started with lowering our barriers. When someone is doing their intake at Juvenile and going through their assessments and processes, that includes a drug test. But that drug test is not a defining factor. No matter what that drug test tells us, that does not determine your housing. You've already made it to housing. We're going to give you housing. That's going to help inform us on how we're going to support you. That may mean that you may have to go to detox depending on what that test says for a few minutes, but we're not going to give your bed away while you're detox either. We're going to work with you to make sure you come to this space safely, but also where you're at. what that's also meant is that we have harm reduction materials sort of on hand and available, question-free, judgment-free. They're actually in various places in the house so that staff don't even have to know necessarily. We do an inventory so we know if some Narcan is missing or if condoms are missing, but that's not, we don't immediately start an investigation, right? We assume that those materials were taken in good conscience for someone to care for themselves or for someone they know and care for. What we know is someone who's dead can't receive services, can't find housing, can't be a part of our community, and that we're less when our community members are dying. And so we've worked hard to learn. The first time someone called us and said, hey, I'm on Suboxone, do you take people on Suboxone? And so this was really early on, I said, I don't know what Suboxone is. and so we called a doctor. We said, hey, talk us through this. And he said, if you're going to house anybody, it's that guy right there. Because people who have taken the brave step to be on medication for opioid use disorder are people that are really trying to reclaim their lives and take the steps they need to take to move forward. And we're dying for people to house these folks. So now we accept folks who are on all methods of MOUD and we celebrate them. We are so excited that they've taken these steps and have found their way to Jubilee Home where we can support them in what is a kind of stigmatized journey a lot of times. So those are a few of the things that we do just in our particular context to really encourage people to stay alive.
Some of the other harm reduction techniques that we also use are writing letters of accommodation for those of our residents who are our clients who are trying to get into housing. We write letters of accommodation to the landlord saying, hey, this is something that may have happened in their past, but what we're trying to do is explain this is their past, this is something that happened, like offenses or anything like that, or could be due to their mental health or substance use in the past, so that we can give them a fair chance. So that is something else that we do for our clients who are working towards housing.
Thank you both. The next question I'd like to ask Kristen, what in your experience are some of the most common supports that are needed for success in low barrier housing?
So I started as executive director in 2020. Prior to that, when our founder was creating, working with formerly incarcerated women to develop what now the Homeless Farm is, a lot of feedback was we need joint housing and employment. So we want to be able to come out and earn an income. And so that, since our inception, has been the core that we tie housing and employment together with one of our housing programs. But people also said, I need time. I think some of the themes we've heard here is there's different lengths of time for different programs. We house people up to 2 years. Of the 50 plus folks who come through our program, I think only 4 have used that full time. And we, most people, it's like when they have the flexibility of being free from probation or parole and they're allowed to choose the communities they return home to finally, that's when folks start making plans to leave. But I think it's the support systems are pretty common to what everything has been here, but I think echoing what David said about community, like people want a group of people who understand what they've been through. Similarly to some of the organizations here, we have peer support. Our staff are predominantly formerly incarcerated women who've gone through our program, so they can speak directly to a lot of the challenges that our current folks experience. So I think the other part too, echoing what David said, we don't ever dismiss someone for relapsing. We don't dismiss someone for a failed drug test. We rarely drug test because oftentimes the probation officers are doing all the drug testing. But we really, the only time we drug test because we're in an employment program if we think someone's not safe in the current workplace. We do have a farm, so like you can't use the tractor if you're under not feeling good. So we try to address that. We try to get people to mental health, but I think at the core what I'm trying to say is that there needs to be a menu of options. I think again, I know David and I talk like every other week because I think part of the support is housing provider need is also other people to talk to when you're trying to push the boundaries on housing. And I know we've talked about like how can you get people into a variety of mental health programs, a variety of substance use counseling, a variety of housing options. We have, particularly for women, who majority of incarcerated women have experienced abuse, physical or sexual of some kind. In our county, the first recommendation from the First Stop mental health and substance use providers group therapy, and our folks are not participating in group therapy for the most part. They don't find that helpful. They find it re-triggering, and they're also usually with men, and that could be very triggering as well. So we try to present a menu of options for folks, give people time and address their needs based on how they're identifying them, and then sometimes we may say that we're identifying this also as a need review, and how can we address that together.
For the next question, I'd actually like all of our panelists to take turns to briefly describe how your program clients are prioritized, and if there's a wait list involved, how that's managed. And can we start with Dave at this end and go down?
Sure. Yeah, this is make sure it's recorded. So we are almost always full in our wait list, and so we do have to make some interesting decisions about that. We prioritize need, and folks in particular coming out of incarceration. So there's this funky thing where people coming out of incarceration don't qualify as the definition of homeless under HUD, which means they there's a gap in services. They can sort of become homeless once they come out pretty quickly, but there's this weird gap. The last administration tried to change some of that, didn't get it through. I think it's safe to say it's not going to happen for at least 4 years. And so we prioritize folks who are in incarceration. If someone calls us who is in a shelter bed or in a community bed that is unsuitable to their needs, and someone calls us and they're incarcerated, we're gonna prioritize that person who's incarcerated. The next priority on our list is probably a partner. So that could be an incarceral facility, that could be the Durham County Jail, and their sort of various programs, drug court, mental health court, some of the programs that we work closely with that have some unique needs and know that juvenile homes is a supportive environment. Those will be our priorities, and after that, it will be a little bit more of a free-for-all for community need. But we're gonna deprioritize if you call me in a bed, but want a different bed. That's gonna be pretty low priority for us. It's not a no. There's a wide range of housing options in terms of some that are more suitable than others, and so we will consider if we know that your bed is probably not meeting your needs, but that's going to be our lowest priority.
So we have been through in Durham, I want to say the last 7 years, and I've been here 6. I want to say 2 or 3 different iterations of how the wait list and prioritization works. And we've learned some things through that. So first, a group of us that worked around family needs started having a coordinated system so that people didn't have to kind of shop around for help or have to keep repeating a story, which is also triggering and traumatizing to keep having to go through that. That was eventually picked up. The city, with dedicated housing funds that are there for their use, created a full coordinated entry system. So we have a place called Entry Point Durham. Everybody calls into that line who has needs. It is partially housed inside of DSS and partially a nonprofit doing the work. And so what that does is assess folks' needs. There's multiple opportunities. In some cases, they're able to divert people from the homeless system entirely. In other cases, they will get prioritized. With the situation we are facing right now, there's a prioritization list for street outreach, believe it or not, because of lack of capacity at times, and then for each of the types of housing. One of the challenges we faced over the last few years, we used to do something called the VI SPDAT. And I can tell you VI means vulnerability index. I do not ever remember what SPDAT means. Google that off to the side maybe. But we found that, and basically it was trying to figure out who is most likely to die. That's if they are left on the street. To put it very, very bluntly, that's the VI. Durham switched, nationally became known that there were some significant bias issues inside the way that it had been designed. So we designed our own system to prioritize folks around issues of are there children involved? What are the, are there, is there justice involvement? Are there substance use issues? And so it's meant to prioritize folks based on all those needs. The part of the shift that we've made, and if I'm too long on this, sorry, but we've learned a lot on this one, so this may be worth it if you read it. Early on, the sense was that the agencies would pick the people that were sort of the creams of the crop, was how it was put. And there was probably some of that that's true. They also were picking people, I think, this was before me, that fit the capacities of the programs as they existed. So people would be a little more likely to be successful because of that. We shifted, there was a shift, I'll put it that way, where everybody coming through the system, whether it was for permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing, was like a 17, my 1 to 20 scale, or like a 16, 17, 18 in terms of their needs. Rapid rehousing is not designed for that. A lot of permanent supportive housing, honestly, it's successful for about 85% of folks. There's about a 15% population that needs other kinds of housing and interventions. And so it created a lot of problems in the system. It overwhelmed a lot of us. We lost a lot of landlords. And it became a strange situation where I would show up and be like, I don't have a substance use issue. I've lost my job, or my partner left, and so I lost my housing. And there was like no avenue. And so we really tried to make sure that there are increasingly multiple avenues and wait lists within that. Because if you don't have that, I kind of liken it to going to the, what's it called now, the no-go center. And the perception was initially everybody who was parked in the front by the exit got to go first. And then what we did was go, okay, everybody in the back is going to go first. But you still have one exit. Now it's multiple exits based on needs and priorities, because you were creating chronically homeless people by definition by having them wait too long. You're increasing people's likelihood of having mental health challenges by having them wait too long, by prioritizing just one set of folks. So we haven't proved that, but everyone we receive comes through that coordinated system.
Sorry for that. And Tiffany, you may be about to mention that but Orange County is still using the VI SPID app, although we've been in conversation and talk about changing it.
I'll be quick. Ours is we do have a prioritization, and that the simple answer is that you just have to be considered unsheltered, meaning that you're staying in a place unfit for habitation. We don't have a wait list because homelessness doesn't really have a time limit or wait for us, so we just come out and we meet with everyone. We don't go to your home, we don't go to see where you are to see, are they really unsheltered? Are they just saying this? Or are they staying behind this trash can? Or we don't do any of that. We just say throughout your word, and then we'll follow up to make sure that we understand and that you understand the definition of unsheltered. That's our prioritization. I won't go through the whole thing.
Sorry.
Please don't.
Okay, so we have our referral sources. Our coordinated entry system is a little bit broken in Wayne County right now. We're working to get it fixed. So in the perfect world, we would take referrals through the by name list of people who were literally homeless and prioritize those. It's not functioning very well right now, so we adapted and changed, and we started taking our referrals from street outreach providers. And they would send a referral form, and then we bring them in for a needs assessment. And the reason we do a needs assessment is because we know there are plenty of homeless individuals in Wayne County who need housing, but they don't all necessarily need Cornerstone, right? Because at Cornerstone, we offer these intensive supportive services. We bring psych services on site. We provide medical care. We have groups. We're trying to really help stabilize people before moving into permanent housing. So in this needs assessment, we're looking at several different domains. First of all, we want to make sure that people can kind of take care of their ADLs, because we don't have people helping with ADLs on site. We look at medical issues. Have you been in the emergency room? Have you been admitted in hospitals multiple times? Are you calling 911 consistently? Or do you have medical issues that you haven't addressed because of your homeless status? We look at mental health, whether it's being off medications, not not currently engaged in mental health care, or pretty symptomatic where it would affect your ability to be successful in housing. Substance use, whether it's not engaged in harm reduction practices, overdose risk, things like that. Homeless history, we prioritize those that are street homeless over somebody at a shelter. If you can live if you can function at a shelter, then we probably don't need bridge housing, right? Because if you're doing okay there, then you probably don't need the independent type style that we have in our bridge housing program. And then also legal issues. Have you been arrested in the past? Have you been incarcerated in the past year or 6 months? And we kind of do a different level acuity scale. And then we take the people with the highest needs. That's what we want to do. We want to help those that have the highest needs, have the highest impactability. As far as wait lists, our program has actually only been open for it'll be 1 year next month. So we're still working out this process of how we manage our wait list. We have about 18 people on it now, but it's kind of fluid, and we're going to keep getting referrals and prioritizing those that are highest needs. And some of those people that are on the wait list might move on and get into permanent housing on their own. That's the goal. That's what we hope. So that's how we're doing it now.
For Benevolence Farm, we haven't done our numbers for last year, but in 2023, I think we had to turn down about 40 women for space constraints. We do have, so if we have a space available and we look at our list of applicants, we will assess when they're getting out of prison, so they don't decide when they get out of prison. So it's not like a graduation program or a certain onboarding date. It's like you got out tomorrow, we can go out tomorrow. And so we did put in place kind of a guideline for staff to help decide if there are multiple people needing a spot at one time or within the same month or so, or we don't project that there are more beds becoming available. We really just look at, in some who has nowhere else to go. So in their application, are they identifying, if they're on the sex offender registry, we know they can't go to most emergency shelters if they have shared housing with family units. If you're on the sex offender registry, you may not be able to access also domestic violence shelters. You can't access housing authority, same for drug trafficking or vouchers. So and from what our folks tell us, that there's very few to no other housing for people on the sex offender registry throughout the state. And some of that is not the fault of the housing providers. It's that our state continues to expand the ineligibility of places people can live on the registry. So I think in the recent expansion of that means that I think Durham is like 75% of housing units are inaccessible to people on the registry, and that's not affordable housing units, that's just units. There's actually a study out of Miami that there were only in the Miami-Dade County, because of the way they structure registry, majority of people have to live in a parking lot and stay in a parking lot to live. And then they can only access 40 houses across the whole Miami-Dade County, and that includes mansions, not affordable housing. So that's a huge issue that we see. We get called about men a lot too for that reason. But we're also asking, the other identity that we consider is trans folks. So again, a lot of our trans folks are saying there's very few places I can go that align with my how I'm living and my identity, whether or not I was boxed into a men or women's prison. So those are kind of two identities we know people are really struggling to find housing, including, and then also even more severe felonies. I could go on a side tangent too about violent felonies and what that means. And a lot of places won't accept violent felonies, and I think that is a learning opportunity for a lot of us. So again, really, if we have a space available, we're trying to accept people who really don't have anywhere else to go, don't have family, or have information types that can bar them from that. And I also say some of our folks also come to us because they said that they found housing, but it required them to have a substance use disorder or a certain type of mental health disorder, and they didn't fall into that category. And so it's incredibly helpful to have those programs, and we should have more of them. And also a lot of people are like, like one person had a correctional officer suggest that they fake a substance use disorder to find housing because they didn't have anywhere else to go. So those are how we think through the wait list and entry challenges.
Very illuminating, thank you. This is going to actually be the last question because I'd like to leave time for some audience questions. But I would like to hear if y'all could, and I'm going to open this up to the whole panel, so take it as you would like. But I just want, if you could say briefly, what do you think are the biggest challenges for adding low barrier housing to a community? Like if there are one or two you can think of.
I actually want to flip that a little bit on the 5 potential solutions to that, because I think we could go down a barrier list for a while, but I'll frame it in a way of how these 5 things could address the barriers really quickly. I think for housing authorities, you can expand your eligibility of people you accept to a degree. There are some federal restrictions, but we worked in 2019 with the Vera Institute and the Burlington Housing Authority to expand their eligibility criteria and make it less restrictive. You can offer direct financial support to people getting into housing. Like I mentioned, you pay security deposits. The kind of nice thing about that is you also get the landlords who are willing to, get their W-9, you know who they are, and then you can do further outreach and say like, what led you to open your housing to people with records? How can we, work with you to continue that, or use, help maybe cultivate unit advocates to get other landlords to do the same. There's also a housing company out of Durham called Forum Houses that I think is innovating ways to use the accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, to provide backyard housing. They're focusing on people of a certain income, but I've also seen in California a nonprofit have the impact justice. They started a program called the Homecoming Project, which is, they model it as the Airbnb for formerly incarcerated people. So they work with people visiting prison, people willing to house them. It's kind of like how refugee communities might get shared or housed with people in the community, and they pay those individuals like you would a rent allocation, and those people can often build a relationship and support those individuals long term. And then I think whenever we're talking about expanding community housing, the theme here is there needs to be a diversity of options too. So, like for example, Benevolence Farm this summer, we're going to be breaking ground on a tiny home community to add 7 individual units to our 13-acre farm. And the reason we're doing that is because people said, and some people mentioned here, that particularly one of our alumni, Deb, who since passed away, she has served 27 years in prison. And she said, I've never lived alone. I went from my birth family to my chosen family, or married family, to jail, to prison. I've never seen a cell phone. I've never flew lines since I have to go online and apply to a job. I don't know how to do that. So she was actually the one that started planting the seed of like, what would it look like for me to practice living alone, but still have my community? And as someone with a severe record, she was also like, I don't know, if I go into the regular community, can I knock on my neighbor's door? Will it be safe for me to even do that, to ask, how do I turn on this, device or something like that? So we're adding that and complementing it to the community housing, shared housing model we have at our Graham location, our housing only model in Burlington, which has the folks are employed in the community that live with us, and then the security deposits, which is like getting people into the long-term community. But the last thing I'll say is that we also have this saying at Benevolence Farm that collateral consequences of a record are lifelong, and so is our support. And so that might not look the same for every person, and it's certainly not as intensive as when people first come home, but we've had alumni 5-6 years out reach back to us if they've had run into issues or trouble or just need advice. Like, I've had someone call us just because their mom passed away and they just wanted someone to talk to. We've had, and it ranges from successes, but also like, hey, I just lost my job. How do I talk to my landlord about I can't pay my rent? Is there a way to talk to them about that and negotiate? So we try to do that as an organization as well.
Would anyone else like to take that question, or should we move on?
I'll even do the positive version. I'll do it quickly. I'll stick with that. I think that's great. One, I think there need to be flexible subsidies where possible that are locally funded, because sometimes those restrictions that come with HUD money and other things, they're understandable, but there's folks that are like right off the edge of that line that really need that support. And I think the other piece, and this is kind of a two-parter, is for supportive housing construction, like the normal amount of subsidy that goes into affordable housing is not enough for supportive housing. It needs to be in the 80 to 100% range in order to make that pencil out. There's a reason a lot of agencies don't build supportive housing. It is because they can't make it work on paper for the long haul, especially when the services are there. And I think that's where sometimes the whole leadership from elected officials is important. We in 30 seconds, we had the opportunity 2 years ago to save 48 units of senior affordable housing that were going to lose their protections, and ordered a property we already had with 24 units. It had land that had never been developed. We had never developed a portion of ours. They could hold another 45 to 50 units. County manager, staff, city manager, staff, commissioners, council members got very excited, found a way through an interlocal agreement. We got our partners there to come publicly and say, we need to save this. And they stepped forward with $6 million that no one had planned to spend. Did it in 6 months, and we got that property, like literally from first conversation to we had money in hand to buy that without any debt on that building in 6 months. And it opened up a whole new side. We promised we'd never do that again. But the willingness to boldly step in when there was an opportunity to save that housing, convert it to supportive housing over time, and add more units. Like sometimes there just is that need to be like, we gotta operate within the bounds, but we gotta move like this is an opportunity we're gonna lose. And they really did in an extraordinary way. Everyone was not on board, but everybody found a way to get it going.
Thanks a lot for that. I'd like to open up to questions. Before I do, I wanted to recognize there's another important community member here who works on low barrier housing right here in Hillsborough, and that's Mr. Doug Peterson over here with the Reentry House in Hillsborough. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I would love if you feel comfortable to say a little bit about your work in Reentry House before we go on to the questions.
Thank you very much. Every time I get a chance to be with these people and Tommy and Will, I learn so much and realize that we're in our 4th year of reentry here in Hillsborough, and it feels like we just started. Everything is a new step. One of the things that new program that I'll just mention, we've had a benefactor who has brought to us the opportunity of what we're calling the Reentry House Plus Personal Development Fund. And we're able to offer $2,000 to people, to justice-involved individuals, men and women, who are in need of things like work clothes, or perhaps they have to pay off an old traffic ticket in order to get a license, or housing. So if they need to have some money to have a down payment on a house. So we're excited about this program. We'll start next month. And once again, we have spent a lot of time this last year visiting other reentry homes, including Benevolence and Jubilee, and we're just so pleased to be a part of that community and learn from them every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'd like to open up to the audience for any questions. We have time for a few before the next stage of our program. Yeah, I'm going to repeat the question, so as long as I can hear this.
Okay, good enough. My name is Larry Reed, and I got a question that lines up with something that I believe Krista said that has to do with how do you outreach to private homeowners or private building owners to let them know your requirements and needs, and or how to better open the doors to individuals. Not everybody's after the top dollar for their rental properties is my question. And then the other question is that I've heard a lot about, two questions. The other one is about, I heard a lot about Durham, Orange County, and Alamance, but how far out are we willing to go? Is it Vance County available as well, or is that just a whole other jurisdiction to be considered.
Sure. So the two questions are, one about specifically how we're engaging in outreach with our landlord partners, and two is how far out are we talking about our community when it comes to low barrier housing? Will it reach as far as Vance, or is it more in this local or more local area?
I think on the landlords, I mean, so transparently, we've just struggled with landlord relationships. We have a few, but I think what I've heard from landlords when we're building relationships is not so much people are concerned about the criminal record, it's about management of the property. So like we had someone who's incarcerated 15 years and we had a landlord who's willing to house her, but their struggle was more like this person didn't know when to communicate to the landlord, like the toilet flooded, because they were afraid I'm gonna get kicked out because it's my fault the toilet flooded, or which may or may not have been true, but they weren't communicating those things to the landlord, or then they were calling landlord saying there's like ants in my kitchen and it's because they had left food out, and they were like, well, that's not really what we call a landlord for. But and then other cases I've had to call and escalated a lot of calls to property managers to try to convince them to house someone over time. So it's been I won't say it's been tumultuous, and some other folks might have ideas on rental property managers, but we are open to working with landlords and even continuing our relationship with the person housed by that landlord to help troubleshoot things, and that's what we do with the Housing First Fund as well. So I'll leave it though to if other folks have ideas. The reach part, so Benevolence Farm has served women particularly from over 40 counties, I believe, majority rural. We've had like one person from Durham, one person from New Hanover, and one person from Mecklenburg, I think. But they're coming from Rockingham County, Gaston County, Pasquotank, all kind of stretches of the state. In our Housing First Fund, we received funding from Coastal Federal Credit Union to work with people in their banking network in eastern North Carolina. So that's like Harnett, Johnson County, I think Pitt County, Edgecombe, and so we are working and trying to support folks in majority rural communities because those are often where the infrastructure for reentry is lacking.
On the landlords, so we did 2 pilots since COVID with support from Blue Cross Blue Shield, where we got to really experiment quite a bit, and some of this is already happening here, but we found that landlord incentives like signing bonuses was critical. So right now, if a new landlord comes on for any of us in our particular system in Durham, they get $2,500 for the first unit and $1,000 after that. Because part of it is that kind of care of the property, like that's people's biggest concern. And so there's kind of at times I thought the national debate, do you have risk mitigation, like there's a fund you can access later or cash in hand on the front end. And our experience has been cash in hand on the front end makes it, people may still come back if there's a lot of damage, but for the most part, that has helped move a lot. And we also, the other shift we made, and I mean this as well as possible, we had often taken kind of like a social worker approach to talking to housing folks of like, this is a just thing, you should do this. And that, like, we had tapped that market. Like we were 100% successful with that. So we actually took more of a business, sales, and marketing approach and brought folks in with that background, partnered with Triangle Apartment Association in different ways, and just were like, this is a business. Like, here's how we can mitigate your risks, and we'll work with you. So we kind of understood where they were coming from. We still take the other approach with certain folks and populations, but that has really helped because it is their business.
Wake County has a similar thing. We have a landlord engagement unit that we offer funds to help incentivize landlords to work, whether they sign just somebody that the landlord engagement unit is helping to place or voucher recipients. They do different levels of incentives and also include like security deposit assistance and damages payments and things like that to help reduce risk. And those people on that team are former property managers and people who work in real estate, so they know how to talk to other property managers.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll say Orange County also, as many here will know, has both prongs of the landlord incentive. It's not as robust a bonus. It's a 1,000 signing bonus for new landlords, but also with the risk mitigation program on the back end, that's up to $3,000 in damages. Yeah, we have time for one more question. I'll go with this gentleman over here. Yeah.
I'm Robert Campbell. I'm affiliated with the Water and New Neighborhood Association. But my question is to each one of you on the panel. How do you approach our veterans who are homeless that is making a transition out of regular service back into civil life? Any of your clients, veterans, and how are you assisting them through the HUD-back program?
Great, thank you. And so that question is just about how each of y'all's programs assist homeless veterans who are transitioning from military back to civilian life.
I called Lucas Verbsky back there in the back. That's what I did.
Yeah, they endure. I mean, the systems are so robust for veterans. There's something called VASH, which is veteran-specific permanent supportive housing. There's SSVF, which is veteran-specific rapid rehousing. And so I know when we have pick, there's very, very few veterans that appear in the system because there's such. It helps the VA too. But there's very robust systems available. I think nationally that's been one of the biggest concentrations is focusing on veteran homelessness and trying to eradicate that. So we have very few on our system because there's so much availability.
I would say, being that former military brat, I try to, with the street outreach approach, I try to approach them on a personal level of my experiences with my father being in the military and just listening and talking to him and getting an understanding of what veterans want to hear and what they don't want to hear and what is needed and some sensitive topics, some sensitive areas of where to approach and what not to approach. And just knowing what's available for veterans in the area, and just letting them know that we are here for them in general. So I would say that's one approach, and that's my approach. We have lots of resources that we can link them to. It's just whether or not at that time they're open to it or coming back again and again and speaking with them. And sometimes it doesn't mean that you go directly to them being a veteran or talking to them about their veteran or their service history. Sometimes it's a buy-in of getting closer into them talking about that. So I would say just talking with them and approaching them as a human first, and then going into their service estimate.
So in Wake County, we have a Veteran Services Division as part of our housing department. And they're doing amazing work within the community. They're doing outreach stuff. We also have a veteran social worker on site at our men's shelter as well to address specific needs of homeless male veterans. Wake County has set aside additional funding for housing veterans. Sometimes there are veterans who maybe have been dishonorably discharged but still providing services and they're not eligible for some of those veteran-specific services. So we have vouchers set aside for those individuals too and help them find housing and connect them with all the veterans benefits that they're eligible for.
So the Illinois Farm we haven't seen as many veterans. We do currently have one veteran, but dishonorably discharged, so we're not as familiar. They can't access a lot of the benefits that one might associate with veterans. But I think what reentry, the overlap between reentry and veteran housing is the trauma-informed approach is often similar and overlaps. This person, for example, like loud noises, are very triggering. Their PTSD overlaps with a lot of PTSD incarcerated people have. So I think it's helpful to use sometimes that as a framework. Even when we're as staff thinking about how to support people, like a lot of our folks put their backs to a door or a window and don't want us to slam doors, like even our front door, like we have to be mindful to shut quietly when we leave. So I think they're, just in terms of trauma-informed care, is really useful, I think, to apply lessons learned from both communities, because often there's a lot of overlap needed to make sure we're caring for people appropriately.
Thank you all. I want to sincerely thank our wonderful panelists. It's been extremely illuminating and a great jumping off point for the next part of the program, which Kate will introduce.
thank you, Blake, for moderating, and thank you all for being here. I'm so sorry Tommy wasn't able, he's actually texting me from Los Angeles that he hated to not be here to talk about reentry house. So thank you, Doug, for stepping up to speak. But Tommy, of course, has a unique perspective with also having success while in transitions, which is which supports the reentry house with folks who have lived experience themselves. And it's a real critical component to the success of that house. But anyways, the next step is really important. I know some of you are going to leave, and I did say I would acknowledge anyone else that came in. I know Commissioner Porty Ascot was here, and Chapel Hill Council member Gaylor Nollert is here, and then Paul Slack, who is our member of the work group, is also here. So thank you all for being here. This next part is really important. You also have a survey. You can submit the survey, hard copy or online, but we have tables where we have very specific questions, and we're going to have a scribe and facilitator at each table. I would encourage you to stop by each table to give input on the specific topics, and they are Table 1, priority populations to be served. Table 2, critical supports needed for low barrier housing success. Table 3, innovative ideas for programs and providers. And 4, how do we measure success in low barrier housing? So please do come by and have your thoughts documented. And if you have additional questions, because we didn't have enough time for questions in this limited time period, please also submit them with your survey, and we will bring them to the work group, and we're sending them out to these panelists and others that we know are working in this field to answer those questions for you directly. So thank you all, and please adjourn to the tables. Appreciate you all being here.
Yeah.